But I want to talk about strategy now, and I'm going to begin with the history of our strategy. There are all sorts of ways to describe history. And I'm going to take a particular cut. I want to describe history in terms of what we do with excess deposits. Now, that may sound bizarre to you because you probably haven't spent that much time thinking about excess deposits lately. But if you're me, this is a big concern because technology companies, in the aggregate, as a group, deposit about 7 times what they borrow. This has been true throughout my 25 years of working with them. So the problem from a commercial banking point of view is, and maybe you don't know how commercial banks work, because most people don't spend that much time thinking about it, but it works like this. We have depositors and we have borrowers. And so we take deposits from people, and then we take that money and we lend it to other people. Now, for some of you, that may seem pretty obvious. For others of you, that may be sort of a great insight. Because when you drop your money off at the bank, I'm not sure you know what they do with it. They actually take it and they lend it to somebody else. And that's what we do. What's interesting about our bank is we work with venture-backed technology companies. They deposit 7 times, as a group, not individually, but as a group, they deposit 7 times as much as they borrow. So can you imagine what a joy that is? As every other bank is looking for deposits, they're dying to get their hands on deposits. We got tons of them. Can you imagine what a problem that is? Because you've got to do something with them. You can't just sit on them. You've got to figure out what to do with them. Because if you just let them sit there, they're a gigantic drag on your ROE and your ROA. And so you got to figure out what to do with them. And in some sense, the history of the strategy, of the evolution of the strategy at Silicon Valley Bank is the history of 3 successive management teams, 3 successive CEOs trying to figure out what to do with the excess deposits, while we're simultaneously helping entrepreneurs succeed. So our first CEO, Roger Smith, and by the way, I have a soft spot in my heart for everybody that's ever worked at Silicon Valley Bank, and Roger is no exception. So I in no way intend to be making fun of anybody, my predecessors, but fortunately, I've gained from their mistakes. I've been here 18 years. I've seen all their mistakes. And what that has given me is the opportunity to develop new ones that have not been tried before. So Roger Smith, our first CEO, sought to use up all those excess deposits by lending them to real estate developers. Somebody should start laughing at this point. Because I get one thing, if there's 2 things that you can take away from this. One is if you can have no competition, you can be more successful, like I was telling you earlier. The other one is never lend to real estate developers. And I don't hope I'm not offending any of you, but real estate developers will eventually, they'll borrow and borrow and borrow, and eventually there'll come a day where they won't pay you back. And that's the history of commercial banking. Almost every bank that's gotten in major trouble in the United States has gotten in major trouble because they've lent a bunch of money to real estate developers. It's not that they're not nice people. It's that they take all this money and they sink it into buildings. And then when the recession comes, and it inevitably comes, they're illiquid, and they can't pay you back. It's not that they don't want to, they just can't. So that's what happened to our first era. 1992 rolled around, and California real estate went into the doldrums, and all of a sudden, real estate developers couldn't pay us back. And we had our first, and if I'm not mistaken, only loss in our history in the 3rd quarter of 1992. And then we had a sea change. And our second CEO, John Dean, came on board. And John spent the first 2 years or so kind of fixing things because of all the problems we had because of the bad real estate loans. And then he had to figure out, he was right where all of us are, he had to figure out what are you going to do with the excess deposits, all these deposits that have piled up. So his idea was, let's lend them to underserved niches. Now that should elicit a smile from somebody who's at least old enough to know that there's no such thing as an underserved niche. Because every single niche has been discovered. And if it's underserved, it's usually because it wasn't a good niche. So we discovered a bunch of underserved niches, and they almost dragged us under. And I won't go into all of the underserved niches. We got ourselves in about 10, 15 of them. One of them was churches. Another one was independent filmmakers. We managed to find 15 independently produced films that would not sell at the box office. We didn't find a single one that sold at the box office. That's an underserved niche. Fortunately for us, all of these problems with churches and independent filmmakers and so on occurred during the boom of 99 and 2000. And during that boom, we had such massive gains from our warrants. Warrants are opportunities to buy stock at a set low price. They're just like options. We had such massive gains from warrants that they more than compensated for our losses in these underserved niches. But then the boom busted, the recession ensued, the warrant gains disappeared, and we were left with these underserved niches.